Bringing the latest now on the crisis at the border. The Biden administration is starting to deport thousands of migrants, mostly from Haiti, who are gathering in South Texas. ABC's Alex Perche has more from Washington.
This afternoon, Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas on the ground in Del Rio, Texas, viewing the growing migrant crisis firsthand.
It is tragic to see families, vulnerable individuals who've been deceived by treacherous and exploitative smuggling organizations. It is tragic and it is heartbreaking.
This morning, the first images of the Biden administration's massive deportation effort captured by our ABC affiliate, WPLG. Flights of migrants from Del Rio, Texas, returning to Haiti. An estimated 13,000 people amassed, many from Haiti, which remains unstable after the assassination of its president and a deadly earthquake last month. Others are from Mexico, South America, and Northern Triangle countries, sheltering underneath the Del Rio International Bridge on the Texas border.
This is completely and totally out of the norm of anything that we've ever seen.
DHS has responded by surging 600 extra border agents to the area to assist. The U.S. planning to ramp up to 7 expulsion flights daily starting Wednesday. ABC's Kenneth Moten is there on the ground.
This was the main point of entry for those migrants. Border Patrol officials say thousands of them, many with children, taking this narrow and treacherous path across the Rio Grande.
Migrants bathing in the river, crossing back and forth for food, makeshift shelters built to protect them from 100-degree heat. And then there's the COVID concern. This small border community overwhelmed by the migrant crisis.
We're a very welcoming and loving community, but, we can only provide so much.
CBP decided to close the Del Rio port of entry late Friday in an effort to gain control of that influx of migrants. It has not said how long the port will be closed. Alex Perche, ABC News, Washington.
Tonight with the migration crisis at the U.S. Mexico border. The United States has begun flying would-be asylum seekers out of a Texas border town. A makeshift camp at the Del Rio International Bridge has quickly grown to more than 12,000 migrants, most of them from Haiti. Local residents say they don't have the resources to help them.
Thousands of Haitians have crossed the border from Mexico to the United States, ending up in makeshift camps in Texas. Living under this bridge, they lack the basic necessities: no shelter, food, water, or sanitation. More than 12,000 people are waiting to be processed by immigration authorities. Many made the desperate journey through Central and South America, fleeing poverty, violence, and natural disasters, looking for a better life. For the past week, migrants have been crossing the Rio Grande from Mexico into the town of Del Rio in the U.S., trying to bring food and other supplies for their families.
There's not enough food for everyone in the camp. It's very bad. We have to leave to look for food.
Overwhelmed by the influx of migrants, the U.S. government is trying to stem the flow. Border agents have stepped up security, preventing people from entering and leaving many in limbo.
With the Mexican guards here, I can't cross here, and I also can't cross there. There are no options because I could keep going to the U.S., but if I go back to Mexico, they'll send me back, and I'll lose the money I have.
Some are being moved to shelters and immigration processing centers, but they've been scarred by the harrowing journeys that brought them here.
I walked and ran, with migration officials chasing us. Not all people are good. There are bad ones too, and they scammed us in other countries too. They took our money. We survived a lot of calamities.
While a humanitarian crisis unfolds, the U.S. and Mexican authorities have ordered the deportation of hundreds of Haitians. Thousands more could follow. It could become one of America's biggest expulsions of migrants or refugees in decades.
And for more now, we want to go to our Washington Bureau Chief, Ines Pohl. She is at the border crossing in Del Rio right now. Ines, it's good to have you with us. You've been talking to people there. What have they been telling you? What's happening at the border right now?
Well, Brent, behind me, behind this fence, people are being put in buses at this very moment, and some of them will be brought to airports and be flown out to Haiti as soon as possible. We talked to the border control and asked them if we could enter and do our jobs as journalists and report on what exactly is happening here behind this fence, but they didn't allow us in.
And so can we describe what the conditions are like underneath this bridge where all of these would-be asylum seekers are living?
It's extremely hot here. It's more than 40 degrees Celsius in the shade. That means over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, this is in the shade. Therefore, all these refugees kind of hide, search for some shelter under this bridge. The circumstances are devastating. We could talk to some people who have been there last night. They don't have any food. We heard that in your report. There are hardly any toilets, there's hardly any water. One woman went into labor, so the situation is just devastating.
And the U.S. has launched this mass expulsion of Haitian migrants from Texas. And what message is the U.S. trying to send to people who are trying to reach the U.S.?
Well, Brent, there is one picture out on Twitter from a colleague. I think this will be the iconic picture of this event, if one can say so, of that. What is happening here right now is a picture of border control on horses. They are cracking their whips on Haitian refugees, trying to prevent them from coming here to the United States, seeking asylum, seeking some human treatment. And this is the exact kind of message the administration, the Biden administration, wants to send. If you come here, we will send you back, even if that means we send you back to a place like Haiti.
And Edith, you are describing what is obviously a crisis at the border, and yet the Biden administration still refuses to call it a crisis.
Well, Brent, these are the worst images for Joe Biden at this moment. He's facing harsh critiques anyhow because of his withdrawal from Afghanistan, which led to tens of thousands of Afghan refugees already seeking asylum here in the United States. He gets harshly criticized by his opponents of his refugee policy anyhow. So I'm sure that he also doesn't want to come here because he doesn't want to be associated with these pictures. So he just tries to kind of resolve this crisis as soon as possible by sending these people back.
Well, Governor Reeves, along with over 20 other governors, sent a letter to President Biden asking him to address the illegal crossing at the border. In a tweet, Reeves says, quote, "Today I joined 25 other governors requesting a meeting with President Biden to discuss the flood of more than 1.3 million people who are entering our country illegally due to his open border policy. It is not his job to run your life, but it is his job to secure our border," end quote.
Governor Kemp is joining an effort to call on the president to take more aggressive action at the U.S. border with Mexico. Governor Kemp and 25 other Republican governors signed a letter asking for open and constructive dialogue regarding border enforcement. The governors want a meeting within 15 days, saying ending the crisis at the border must be a priority. The call comes amid a surge of migrants at the borders, with thousands of people showing up in the last several days in Del Rio, Texas, hoping to gain entrance into the United States. The crowd leading to concerns about public health and safety in the hot Texas heat and the sanitary conditions as well.
No, obviously they're ignoring it. We got 13,000 Haitians there in Del Rio, Texas. Obviously they're ignoring it. But I find it interesting. At the time when we have that, what does the Biden administration announce today? They announced that, oh, for people who come here legally, foreign nationals, you're going to have to be vaccinated. And what is the Democrat Congress focused on doing? Trying to give amnesty to 8 million people who came here illegally. The American people are fed up with this. They'd like some leadership from the White House, from President Biden, from Vice President Harris, but they're certainly not seeing it. And it's because the White House is not willing to embrace the policies that work. A full implementation of Title 42, as Mr. Wolf was talking about, building the wall, going back to the Remain in Mexico policy, those policies that work, the White House won't embrace it because the hard left won't let them.
To the growing crisis on the southern border, the Biden administration now reporting and deporting thousands of migrants, mostly from Haiti, who have gathered in Del Rio. This is exclusive video of one of those planes taking off today, headed to Port-au-Prince. The White House facing tough questions about how those Haitian migrants are being rounded up and how they're being treated.
The Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security traveling there today to address the situation. And we're now hearing from a couple who was just released. Local 10's Glenna Milberg is live in Del Rio with the latest. Glenna.
Now, Calvin, Nicole, the administration is actually taking it from both sides here. One side accusing the administration of being the blame for everything that's happening here, and then the other side accusing the administration of this really harsh backlash of mass deportations. And then caught in the middle, thousands of desperate people, families who are mostly going to be deported. We met a couple today who was among the lucky ones, even though they're not quite sure why.
7 months pregnant.
That baby may be why Jean and Julia are not among those summarily deported.
I did not go to Brazil to live. I only went to Brazil to pass through to come here.
From Brazil, after a 10-country journey, they arrived at this squalid encampment under the international bridge last week. The plan all along, they said, fearing Haiti's unstable government and gangs. They paid $7,000 to a smuggler who told them it would all be possible. Exactly the kind of story the DHS Secretary here today says is fueling this explosion at the Del Rio border this last week.
We are very concerned that Haitians who are taking this irregular migration path are receiving false information that the border is open or that temporary protected status is available.
The sudden and dramatic plan to end it with mass deportations using Title 42, the U.S. law used in national health emergencies like the pandemic to refuse entrance to migrants, short-circuit the immigration claims process.
The deportation needs to stop.
Yeah.
This is inhumane, and Title 42 must be repealed.
2 North Miami Council members came here today to lobby for change and for reprieve.
There are a lot of them that have families that are willing and able to take care of them.
So how are they going to get there from here?
That's a good question.
Those council members are part of a national network of Haitian American elected leaders. A lot of them are here working with the NGOs, the social services, non-governmental organizations, and Secretary Mayorkas today actually said the government is relying on a lot of these civilian organizations to help with what's going on here as these migrants are either deported or resettled. They expect this camp to be completely out of people in the next week because, Calvin, Nicole, that's how many people they are deporting on those flights. Their goal is 3,000 a day out. I'm Glenna Milberg, live in Del Rio today, Local 10 News.
And Glenna, with the deportations, it seems that the Biden administration is going after the symptom of the problem, but what about the problem itself? And that is, you talked about in your report, the bad information that Haitians are getting and also the smugglers who are bringing the Haitians actually to the Texas border.
Yeah, I think you saw today the secretary go right there because he was saying, you know, typically when government officials talk to the press or the public, they have talking points. And if you listen closely, you'll hear those talking points over and over. And boy, a big talking point was the message they want to get out that the borders are indeed closed, that there is no opportunity right now for anyone to circumvent that, despite the fact that Haiti is in crisis, both socially, economically, politically, gang warfare. That messaging is a critical tool for this government today to try to stem what's happening here. As for the smugglers, that's a whole other story. The secretary said that they are trying to identify the smugglers. Typically, smugglers in this part of the country have to do with drug cartels, another huge issue, but that certainly is part of the whole.
Our Glenna Milberg on the ground for us in Del Rio, Texas. Glenna, thank you.
Volume of people coming across the border was rather sudden. That is probably the understatement of the year. There are about 13,000 people currently living underneath that bridge. Chad Wolf, the former acting DHS Secretary, is with us right now. So, Chad, you've been watching these images as we've been streaming them on Fox News for the last few days. Now, these Haitian migrants, mostly Haitian migrants, just walking across that dam between Ciudad Acuña and Del Rio, Texas. Your thoughts on what we're seeing, particularly given the fact that the Secretary of DHS continues to say the same thing he's been saying for months, and that is, as he deadpans it, the border is closed.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. A couple of thoughts here. The border is obviously not closed. We see record numbers of individuals coming across it every day. You see images of Haitians and others streaming across the river, the border, and the Mexican government not stopping them. What the Biden administration needs to do, they need to engage the Mexican government. They have the ability to stop these individuals. And this is what Remain in Mexico and the Migrant Protection Protocols was all about. Making sure that Mexico had skin in the game to stop this illegal immigration that we see today. They're not doing enough. They need to do more at the end of the day. But to have the Secretary say that the numbers kind of crept up on them or it was a surprise, and that's simply not true. I mean, you see historic numbers, over 200,000 individuals crossing that border in July and then again in August in a 30-month period. It didn't sneak up on them. We've seen this. We predicted this. We warned them against it. This was going to happen at the end of the day. And on the Haitian front, John, I would just say most of these Haitians don't live in Haiti. They live in South America and they live in Central America. And there's a reason that they're coming to the border now is because they see these numbers month after month after month. All of these individuals coming into the country and staying in the country. And that's what they're following. It's because of the open border policies that we currently have right now.
It's a pretty interesting statement that they have been living in places like Brazil and Chile and Bolivia for years. They couldn't get status there. They couldn't get a job. And so then they turn their sights on the United States and say, well, if we can't do it here, maybe we can do it there. Bruno Lozana, who is the mayor of Del Rio, Texas, he's a Democrat who's probably at his wit's end because of all this, tweeted over the weekend, quote, the vice president is able to visit the fun events across the country while American communities continue to grapple with failed immigration reform. Where is the visit to Del Rio, Texas? You probably heard Peter Doocy ask the press secretary, isn't the vice president supposed to be taking care of this? To which Jen Psaki said, she is looking after this. What do you say to that?
It's outrageous. It's outrageous that she has been put in charge of a national crisis and she is nowhere to be found. And so my question to the press secretary is, if she's engaged, when is the last time that she's talked with the Mexican officials? When is the last time that she has talked with the Central American officials, not the State Department, not officials at the State Department, but when has she personally engaged with individuals down there? Again, she's been to the border one time in El Paso, far away from the crisis that's going on today. They're absent from the fight. And I appreciate the secretary going down there. He should be down there almost around the clock at this point. Border Patrol officers are overwhelmed day in and day out. They need support, they need leadership, and they're simply not receiving any of that from the current administration.
Jen Psaki again today reiterating that a lot of people are being expelled under Title 42. Judge Emmett Sullivan, though, D.C. District Court, has said that he is going to suspend Title 42 expulsions, at least for families, in 2 weeks. Mr. Former Secretary, what's going to happen in 2 weeks when they suspend Title 42 expulsions for these families?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, the court order doesn't apply, Title 42 doesn't apply to single adults. They can still remove single adults, but yet it applies to families. So either COVID is an issue for families as it is for everyone and single adults. So it's the health beyond that or the science beyond that ruling just doesn't make any sense to me. But what I'll say is that the Biden administration really hasn't been applying Title 42 to families for quite some time. I think last month they just expelled about 18% of families under Title 42. So it will have an impact, but they have pretty much exempted families from Title 42 from a policy perspective going back several months from now. So they continue to talk about Title 42, but it's usually in the single adult cases more so than the families.
Yeah, a few more than 300 people have been sent back so far from that group that's under the bridge with flights that left yesterday. It's going to take them a long time to clear that backlog. The former acting secretary of DHS, Chad Wolf, great to see you. Thanks for coming in today. Appreciate it.
And we begin at the border, the situation in Del Rio, where thousands of Haitian migrants
are staying under a bridge has prompted a visit from the DHS chief himself. The Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, says it is a challenging situation. KENS 5 border reporter Vanessa Croy has been covering the migrant surge in Del Rio for several days. Vanessa, Mayorkas said hundreds of additional Border Patrol personnel are now on the ground to help manage this crisis.
Well, that's right, Henry. 600 agents have been brought in to help. That's DHS volunteers, Border Patrol agents, and customs officers. However, Secretary Mayorkas didn't clearly answer our question today as why it took several days for the federal government to bring in extra help. Now, as we reported last week, more than 14,000 Haitians have been camping under a bridge in Del Rio after crossing the Rio Grande from Mexico. We're learning that number today is around 12,000. It's a surge unlike anything longtime Border Patrol agents have ever seen. The number of people under the bridge are going down day by day, and as the federal government says it's putting migrants on flights out of the U.S. Several thousand migrants have also been bused to other locations to be processed, according to Secretary Mayorkas.
The majority of migrants continue to be expelled under CDC's Title 42 authority. Those who cannot be expelled under that authority and do not have a legal basis to remain will be placed in expedited removal proceedings. DHS is conducting regular expulsion and removal flights to Haiti, Mexico, Ecuador, and Northern Triangle countries. Irregular migration poses a serious security risk to the migrants themselves. Trying to enter the United States illegally is not worth the tragedy, the money, or the effort.
Now, we're also learning today that the National Disaster Medical Assistance Team has been brought in to help. We also learned this afternoon that 7 members of the San Antonio Fire Department are also out here helping. Reporting live in Del Rio, Vanessa Croy, KENS 5, Eyewitness News.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Advocacy group Haitian Bridge tweeted today that a total of 6 deportation flights left within the last 24 hours, and 6 more are expected tomorrow. Now, the group has accused the Biden administration of human rights abuses, calling this policy cruel.
In other news, the crisis intensifying at the Texas-Mexico border. Thousands of migrants crowding in a temporary camp under the Del Rio International Bridge in Texas, hoping for possible entry into America. But the U.S. has now launched a mass expulsion of the mostly Haitian migrants.
Natalie Brand has the very latest from the White House.
Facing extreme heat and food shortages, migrants crossed the Rio Grande between Mexico and the United States Monday to get supplies. At one point, around 12,000 migrants set up camp near the border crossing in Del Rio, Texas, most of them from Haiti. This man says he's afraid to return to his home country, saying there's no safety and no work, referencing the recent assassination of Haiti's president. Many of the people here had fled Haiti after the 2010 earthquake and settled in Central and South America before making their way north.
It is tragic and it is heartbreaking.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas traveled to southern Texas Monday, where the U.S. has begun mass deportations. On Sunday, more than 300 Haitians, including families, were flown back.
We have reiterated that our borders are not open and people should not make the dangerous journey.
DHS is planning more flights this week, but officials on the ground say they want the federal government to do more.
It takes too long to process an asylum claim. You know, the system has been broke for 40, 50 years. It's used as a political football, from one agenda to the next.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott asked the Biden administration for an emergency declaration as a result of the situation at the border. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
Let's bring in a former chief of U.S. Border Patrol and retired acting ICE Director Ron Vitello. Ron, great to see you as always. What do you make of the White House's abrupt reversal of course on the Haitians?
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. It's obviously a little bit too late. This crisis started several days ago. They sent a signal across the globe, including to Haiti, that they weren't going to deport people who came in the country illegally. And so the images that we're seeing from Del Rio should disturb all of America, whether you're on the right, whether you're in the middle, whether we're on the left. We deserve better from our leadership at Homeland and certainly in this administration. This kind of chaos is not good for anybody. It's not good for our cities and towns in the homeland. It's not good for that border community. And think about the agents who have to deal with that crush of humanity each and every day and then go back home to their own families. This is all under the time of a pandemic. We're just one incident away to making that camp a disaster for anybody that's involved. And you have this kind of chaos where people are coming back and forth across that border. It drives more drug smuggling. It increases human trafficking. Everybody that's in that pipeline is at risk, both from health and safety perspective, but also from being exploited by criminal gangs. And so, yeah, they have to put resources at this problem. They needed to do it sooner than later. Now they're playing catch up, and you saw the thousands of people that are there. It's really unfortunate. We deserve better. This is the world's only superpower, the most prosperous nation on the planet, and we're just letting people walk into the country. And where's Mexico in this? You know, during the migrant protection protocols, let's set aside that they destroyed that policy on January 20th. Let's set that aside. Well, where's Mexico in this? They're letting thousands of people come through their country and just walk up through Ciudad Acuña into Del Rio without any consequence, without any monitoring, without any health screening, with nothing. They're just letting this happen. Mexico needs to get engaged here also. They need to protect their border from this uncontrolled flow, and then that would help on the Del Rio side as well.
You mentioned the images, obviously heartbreaking images to see all weekend long. Over 12,000 migrants now under that Del Rio International Bridge. If the administration wanted to, how could they turn this around starting today?
Well, reinstate the Remain in Mexico program, reinstate the migrant protection protocols. If there are people in this group of thousands that have a legitimate asylum claim, and that is that they're being persecuted by their government for religious or other purposes. If they're being, if they need asylum in the United States, then they can wait in Mexico for their hearing. That's what ended the last surge in 2019 and 2020. That's why this surge occurred. You know, everybody talks about the root causes. We're going to work on the root cause. The root cause is we ended a policy that kept people an opportunity to have their due process, but outside of the country and not released into the United States. We've driven this surge by releasing thousands of people into the United States because they brought their children or they sent their children alone. And so that's driven this flow to Del Rio, and we've seen it all across the border since January.
Okay, but Ron, can you envision a scenario whereby this White House actually does that? Because that would be an admission that they've done something wrong.
Yeah, well, we had 212,000 encounters in July, 208,000 in August. They failed to act. Congress could force them to reinstate these policies. They could put the force of law behind the migrant protection protocols. They could legislate that in. I don't see that happening either. And so in the meantime, unfortunately, the men and women of DHS and their families have to pick up the pieces, right? Because in the case of the Border Patrol, they can't say no to people who are coming across the border like that. They need to be put into the system. They need to be processed. They need to be given their due process in immigration proceedings. And so unfortunately, again, they're left to pick up the pieces because this administration fails to act.
Before we let you go, let's talk more about the brave men and women that you did lead when you were at Border Patrol and at ICE. How impossible is it for those brave men and women to do this job? Because, look, this was a tough job months ago. It has gotten progressively worse, and now we see the scenes that we see now. How do they do it, Ron?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. They're brave men and women that go out each and every day to protect us. They're certainly mission-focused. They're capable of doing this work, but it must be very demoralizing for them to know that this could have been avoided with some proper prior planning and keeping those policies in place until there was a plan for this surge. It's tough, and my heart goes out to them.
Ron Vitiello, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And now new at 5, Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas today goes to South Texas, where the process of removing Haitian migrants has picked up speed. Yesterday, more than 300 Haitians were flown back to that country. Today, migrants crossed the Rio Grande between Mexico and the United States to get supplies. Thousands of migrants had set up camp near the border crossing in Del Rio, Texas, most of them from Haiti.
We have reiterated that our borders are not open and people should not make the dangerous journey.
More flights are expected later this week. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has asked the Biden administration to declare an emergency because of the situation at the border.
Ken Molestina of our sister station KTVT is live for us tonight in Del Rio, Texas, with more on the message being sent tonight by the Biden administration. Ken?
Well, good evening to you, Lauren and Jim. The message out here on the border very clear to all of the migrants, specifically the Haitians that we have been talking about. And the message is, do not come here. Do not come to the border because you will be sent back. Federal officials have been very busy yesterday and into today keeping that promise. We can tell you that the majority of those underneath the Del Rio International Bridge are in fact overwhelmingly from Haiti. And flights to return people to the island have already started. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says they will continue to have about 1 to 3 flights every single day until they clear them out of here. The current head count is about 1,100 people underneath that bridge, and that's of today. It was 15,000 at one point, so that kind of gives you an idea of the speed at which they are moving to deport those who have crossed the border illegally and are waiting to be processed. Secretary Mayorkas says the temporary protective status, or the TPS as it's known, that many Haitians are seeking here in Del Rio does not apply to them. Here he is explaining it earlier today. Have a listen.
Only Haitians living in the United States before July 29th are eligible for temporary protected status. We have reiterated that our borders are not open and people should not make the dangerous journey. Individuals and families are subject to border restrictions, including expulsion.
Interestingly enough, federal officials saying that it is in fact Mexican cartels and drug smuggling groups on the other side of the border that are offering all of this false information to these Haitian groups of migrants that are making their way north. But again, the message here is do not come here. This border is not open. You will be deported if you do cross here illegally, guys.
Ken, from what we understand, many of the Haitians have not actually lived in Haiti for many, many years. What do we know about the efforts back in Haiti to accept the migrants back once they return?
Yeah, that's a big question, Jim, and one that was addressed earlier at that news conference with Secretary Mayorkas. And what we're hearing today, at least, is that the White House has been ordered to work with several U.S. agencies to sort of coordinate the deportation and the return of these Haitian nationals back to Haiti, because, as you mentioned, Haiti obviously has a lot of issues that they're having to deal with themselves, but they are working with the U.S. government to try and make this process as seamless as possible. We know that Haitian officials are worried that the return of these nationals will cause trouble for them once they do return to the island, Jim, because many of them will be homeless once they do return to their home. Jim?
Ken Molestina live for us in Del Rio, Texas. Of course, we have a large Haitian American community here in South Florida, so a lot of people keeping a close eye on the situation there. Thank you, Ken.
There's a new crisis at the southern border. Thousands of migrants, as you see here, most from Haiti, have set up camp. This is a bridge right near the Rio Grande, and they're hoping to be allowed into the United States. 26 governors, including Governor Charlie Baker and Governor Chris Sununu, have now signed a letter demanding that the Biden administration do more to address the situation. WBZ's Lisa Hughes is here in studio for us tonight. Lisa, how is the federal government planning to respond?
Well, Paula, in a variety of ways, and you could just see how urgent the situation is there. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas traveled to Texas to see the situation at the border, where temperatures have now soared to 100 degrees. Facing extreme heat and shortages of food, migrants cross the Rio Grande between Mexico and the U.S. to get supplies. At one point, around 12,000 migrants set up camp near the border crossing in Del Rio, Texas, most of them from Haiti. This man says he's afraid to return to his home country, saying there's no safety and no work, referencing the recent assassination of Haiti's president. Many of the people here fled Haiti after the 2010 earthquake and settled in Central and South America before making their way north.
It is tragic and it is heartbreaking.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas traveled to southern Texas today, where the U.S. has begun mass deportations. Sunday, more than 300 Haitians, including families, were flown back.
We have reiterated that our borders are not open and people should not make the dangerous journey.
DHS is planning more flights this week, but officials on the ground say they want the federal government to do more.
It takes too long to process an asylum claim. You know, the system has been broke for 40, 50 years. It's used as a political football, you know, from one agenda to the next.
And there are now so many people seeking asylum. The Department of Homeland Security says it has added about 600 agents and officers to that area. And Anna Rittis, if necessary, will send even more.
President Biden faced an intense criticism over this split-screen moment where he was seen biking on vacation while images from Del Rio, Texas show a humanitarian crisis with thousands of migrants packed in squalid conditions under a bridge. The Department of Homeland Security says it is working to process and remove many of the more than 12,000 Haitian immigrants camped out. Secretary Mayorkas forced to go down to the border today to address the situation.
If you come to the United States illegally, you will be returned. Your journey will not succeed, and you will be endangering your life and your family's lives. This administration is committed to developing safe, orderly, and humane pathways for migration. But this is not the way to do it.
Okay, Jesse, he said the border is closed. If you see the footage that Bill Melugin caught over the weekend with thousands of migrants just walking across the border does not look closed. And at what point are we going to get these urgent measures that Mayorkas is talking about? Because it's now September 20th.
Yeah, we're never going to get it, Dana. Biden's not running the country. He's running it into the ground. You cannot have third world tent cities at our gates. He said he was going to bring this country back to normal. That's not normal. You can't have law enforcement on horseback trying to round up waves of West Africans and Haitians pouring across the border from tent cities. That is craziness. And now we've had back-to-back months, August and September, of shocking images kind of assaulting the senses of the American people that we were not told was going to happen. Joe Biden was supposed to get a hold on this stuff, and it's exploded under his watch. Let's put this in Biden's home turf. Imagine we did this to Delaware, right? Imagine we shipped thousands and thousands and thousands of migrants into Delaware, and they're fishing on the bay. They're riding Amtrak, packed in, unvaxxed, little English, no skills. Where are they going to live? In tents? They're going to live at the beach? Or you're going to put them in housing and to put them in starter homes? You're going to have to double every classroom size of every public school district. You're going to have to raise taxes to pay for the social services. They're going to need health care. They're going to need housing. They're going to need welfare. This is what they're doing. They're going to steal jobs. They're going to lower wages. And then in a generation, they're going to have political power because their families are going to be able to vote. So then they're going to just change the entire direction of Delaware. Do Delawareans want that, Dana? Did they ask for that, Dana? They didn't. Why is Joe doing that to Texas? He's not doing it to Delaware. He's doing it to Texas. And Democrats and Republicans are saying, slow it down, Joe. Hispanics, blacks, and whites are saying, Joe, slow it down. He's not doing anything. He sits at his little beach house and he obsesses over masks to slap on second graders. The man is sick.
Okay.
Sick man.
There was an exchange today that I want to get your take on, Greg.
Sure.
This is our own Peter Doocy asking the White House press secretary where the vice president is.
Where's the vice president on any of this? Isn't she supposed to be addressing the root causes of migration?
Absolutely, and she has been addressing the root causes of migration by working with countries in the region to ensure they have the assistance they need to reduce the number of people who are coming and trying to make those journeys across the border.
Greg, this weekend on Saturday, Kamala Harris was at a college football game doing the ceremonial coin toss, which I don't think it's a root cause.
She was rooting instead of looking for the root cause. So. By the way, I'm opening a hair salon called Root Causes, in case you want to touch up.
I might need one.
What are you saying? Is the vacation redundant or is it preferable, right? Have you ever had a coworker who you're delighted when they take a week off?
Why are you looking at me?
But there's always the contrary. Say, oh, this has been going on forever. This sort of thing has been going. No, this has not. This refugee camp, that's new. You got, what, 13,000 people? I can't remember the number. In a city of like 20,000, 25,000. That's never happened. Wouldn't have happened under a watchful administration that takes the immigration and the border seriously. I returned to Fox News' reporting. The drone footage, the helicopter reporting has forced this issue. Not in the CNN style of pushing innuendo and divisiveness. This is not Jussie Smollett or Russian collusion or the Fine People hoax. This is the visuals of chaos and calamity approaching the visuals of Afghanistan, except these people want to get in, Afghanistan want to go out. But it forces you to ask a question. Would this have ever been addressed if it wasn't for the network producing these visuals? And the answer is no, because no other media would have been bothered to do it. But we realized then, the conclusion to my long and painful thought, is that real journalism only exists if you hate the president, right? That's why none of these networks are bothering to do it. They would only do it about Trump. But if they're on the Biden team, they're not going to do this story. We would have done this. We were at the border under Trump and under Biden, and this network is producing Pulitzer Prize-winning visuals there, and they will not get rewarded for it. Lastly, ongoing lesson in the education of incentives. This is what happens when you don't have friction. People come in. You got to have friction.
Jessica, the mayor of Del Rio, that's the town where the bridge is, he said that he was trying to get a hold of the White House over the weekend and didn't get a call back. Now, he gets a visit from the Secretary of Homeland Security today, but that seems a little like you're not doing your job if you don't call him back.
Well, it's an emergency level, the same level after you've had a hurricane, right, where everyone needs FEMA on the phone and they need to speak to the administration about what they're going to do for it. That's what happens in a city of 25,000 when there are 13,000 new people under a bridge. And when I first saw the footage, I think Friday, the drones started operating again, I was like, this doesn't look like it normally does at the border, what's going on? And then I thought, how did thousands and thousands of Haitians end up there? And went and read about it, and these are people who entered Central and South America in 2010 after the earthquake. They worked mostly in Brazil until the Rio Games when jobs dried up there, and they've been slowly migrating. I'm not saying every single one of them, but it's a new immigration problem that we have not been talking about, certainly under any administration.
One of them, in fact, Dagan, I read this article about somebody who had a Haitian who had immigrated to Chile. He had been in Chile, he had been working, and then he said that he heard that Biden is letting people in. So he joins the folks, and they come up, and they get across the border. And then, all of a sudden, he finds himself on a deportation flight because they're sending the single young men back that they can. He goes back to Haiti, but he hadn't even been in Haiti for 11 years.
Right, and on that deportation flight, it was a little more than, over the weekend, 300 individual men, but there were 3,300 migrants who had been moved out from under the bridge on Friday. So where did the other 3,000 or so go? Somewhere in the middle of the country, who knows where. But what happened was maybe they were watching in Chile or Brazil or other countries, Joe Biden standing on a stage with other Democratic presidential candidates 2 years ago, raising his hand saying illegal immigrants are going to get government health care. And then they remove all of the border protections. Once he took office, the people in this administration were told by Trump officials, here's the roadmap on how to stop illegal immigration at the border. And clearly, Biden and company have been willing to use their vast executive power for their own political benefit when they see fit. They thought when they think the cause is worthy. They didn't like the abortion law in Texas that saved more babies from dying, so they unleashed the whole of government to change things they didn't like. Even Joe Biden was willing to overstep his executive power, his executive authority, knowingly on the eviction moratorium. It was brazen lawlessness. They admitted it. They did it anyway, but this is okay with them. Human suffering and misery and financial burdens and health burdens put on the citizens of the United States who live in these border communities. It's classic Biden.
The Biden administration is certainly not pro-human suffering, but just really quickly on the abortion point.
What do you call this?
That bill is so out of the mainstream that 70% of Republicans don't even support it. No, it is.
My point is
you don't
that
even know that you are pregnant by 6 weeks, Dagan, in a lot of cases. I mean,
Well, there's children suffering at the border, and it's been going on all year. And what have you heard out of the Biden administration? Nothing. He's riding his bike around Rehoboth.
All right, well, plenty of time to talk about that Texas law. Ahead, the media turning on President Biden, with some saying he is suffering from a credibility crisis. We'll be right back.
Question about what's going on at the border. Is somebody asking the foreign nationals who are walking into Del Rio, Texas, and setting up camps on this side of the border for proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test?
Well, first of all, I can readdress for you or re-talk you through what steps we take.
That is the policy for people who fly into the country. So if somebody walks into the country right across the river, does somebody ask them to see their vaccination card?
Well, let me explain to you again, Peter, how our process works. As individuals come across the border, and they are both assessed for whether they have any symptoms. If they have symptoms, the intention is for them to be quarantined. That is our process. They're not intending to stay here for a lengthy period of time. I don't think it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. These are individuals, as we've noted and as we've been discussed. We are expelling individuals based on Title 42. Specifically because of COVID, because we want to prevent a scenario where large numbers of people are gathering, posing a threat to the community and also to the migrants themselves. So those are the policies that we put in place, in large part because, again, the CDC continues to recommend Title 42 be in place, given we're facing a global pandemic.
Where's the vice president on any of this? Isn't she supposed to be addressing the root causes of migration?
Absolutely, and she has been addressing the root causes of migration.
Jen, a follow-up question on Haiti. There are photographs and reports of border agents on horseback using what appear to be whips on Haitian migrants. Does the administration view that as an appropriate tactic? Can you speak to that? There are people who are upset about it.
Yeah, understandably so. I have seen some of the footage. I don't have the full context. I can't imagine what context would make that appropriate, but I don't have additional details. And certainly, I don't have additional context. April, I don't think anyone seeing that footage would think it was acceptable or appropriate.
I want to follow up on the question about Haitians and specifically these photos that are surfacing on Border Patrol agents seemingly using whips. I know you said that there's no context that it would be seen as inappropriate. So the question really is, why would this be happening under the Biden administration? Is this going to stop? What would I wonder sort of what are going to be the consequences if what we're seeing is what we're seeing?
I mean, Yamiche, it's all good questions. We just saw this footage. It's horrible to watch. I just have to get more information on it. Again, April, I don't have more information on it. I've also seen the video. I can't imagine what the scenario is where that would be appropriate. I'm certainly not suggesting that, but we've just seen the footage earlier this morning.
On the photo, I know you said that you're still assessing it, but just to add, if this is what we see, is it the president's stance or the White House's stance that whoever these border agents are using what seems to be whips on migrants, that they would be fired or at least never be able to do that again?
Of course they should never be able to do it again.
The United States has started deportation flights for thousands of Haitian migrants camped out under a bridge in Del Rio, Texas. Border agents tell us that there are at least 12,000 more still there, living in squalid makeshift camps amid a very dangerous heat wave. Bill Malusian is live at the border in Texas with this. Bill, I had it was interesting for me to be in contact with you over the weekend. For all the stories that you've covered, you think this one is one of the most incredible of your career?
Dana, good morning to you. It absolutely is. It's like another world down here, and the federal government is still grappling with how they're going to fix this. Take a look at the situation under here. Again, we are live under the International Bridge here in Del Rio, where, as you mentioned, upwards of 12,000 migrants are still living here, waiting to be processed, waiting to see what happens to them after they crossed illegally into the country. You can see many of them have used sticks and plants to kind of build temporary structures here. Some of them have been here since Wednesday. Many of them don't know how long they're going to be here or if they're going to be deported. But take a look at this second camera angle we have right here, just to give you the full perspective of how many people are here. This is a massive camp. It looks like a third world refugee camp. The conditions here are absolutely horrible, and it is blistering hot out here in the middle of the day. We're talking 105 degrees, horrible conditions, and Border Patrol right now still doesn't have the manpower. Take another live look at our drone above. We've been showing our drone for several days down here now. Again, just showing you the scope of how many people are down here. The federal government has started repatriation flights back to Haiti. It's mostly Haitians down here, but that's mostly single men being sent back. A lot of the women, children, and family units will be able to stay. They'll be processed and released into the U.S. with NTAs, notice to appears. Why are there so many people here? Take a look at this remarkable video we shot on Saturday. We got exclusive access to go out on the Rio Grande in a boat where we were watching a constant stream of hundreds of migrants crossing the river illegally from Ciudad Acuña, Mexico, just walking across the river over a dam right into the United States, which is right down the road from where this bridge is. You can see the mass of hundreds of them right there. That wasn't stopped until Texas DPS surged hundreds of troopers down here. They were finally able to plug that up. Well, what happened? The migrants moved downriver. Take a look at this video from yesterday. This was another area where they were trying to cross. Texas DPS and Border Patrol on horseback were having to go down there to try to push those migrants back across the river and back into Mexico. Yesterday, Del Rio's mayor, a Democrat, said he's tried getting in touch with the White House, but he hasn't heard anything. Take a listen.
You have been trying to tag President Biden on Twitter. Have you heard from him or his office or Vice President's
Not directly from the Vice President or President's office, unfortunately. I have been just trying to spread the dire situation here.
And at 12:05 p.m. local time here in Texas, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas will be coming to Del Rio, will be holding a press conference. Fox News will be here, and we'll give that to you live. We'll send it back to you.
Bill, it is incredible. Thank you for all the images and your hard work. We'll stay in touch today. Thank you.
Thousands of Haitians who set up camp under the International Bridge in Del Rio, Texas, are back in their home country this morning. Sunrise reporter Victoria Valderrama is joining us in the studio with more on the 3 flights that left from Texas yesterday. Victoria.
Good morning, Sierra. Well, according to the Department of Homeland Security, the migrants were medically screened prior to boarding the flights Sunday. Many of the migrants were deported under CDC Title 42, which allows for immediate deportation of migrants to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Border Patrol officials said they have removed some 3,400 people in the past 2 days, and they expect that number to increase in the days ahead. Migrants, most of them from Haiti, started coming up from the border last week, fleeing poverty, political unrest, and natural disasters. Their numbers swelled to around 14,000, stretching local resources beyond their breaking point. The DHS sent hundreds of border agents to implement a plan to relieve the pressure on the border. Border Patrol officials said it could be about a week before the migrants are moved, either to other processing centers or back to their home country. Reporting in the studio, Victoria Valderrama, Chris 6 Sunrise. Paulo.
We're awaiting Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to arrive in Del Rio, Texas, for a briefing on the border crisis. Del Rio, of course, is where more than 12,000 people, mostly Haitian migrants, have camped out under a bridge in squalid conditions. Border officials are overwhelmed. Agents on horseback were struggling to turn away the surge of people crossing the Rio Grande. And you might imagine President Biden would be working overtime to deal with this catastrophe and the magnitude and the scope and the reach that it has all over the country. But he, in fact, spent his weekend at his home in Delaware, taking leisurely bike rides and hanging out at the beach. It's not just him showing no sense of urgency. Vice President Kamala Harris was at their alma mater, Howard University, this weekend to do the coin toss at a football game. Despite their inaction on the actual crises, plural, going on, none of them are going away, particularly this border situation. Even former Obama Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson says President Biden needs to take it seriously.
We have to get control of our borders. 200,000 a month is a lot of people. DHS just released the numbers for August. It's 200,000. August is typically a month where it's very low. And those kinds of numbers and the images you just showed your audience saps the ability, it overwhelms the ability of DHS, the Border Patrol, ICE to cope with the incoming. It saps the communities on the border. It saps Catholic charities. Have to do something to enhance enforcement.
You know, again, Mike, I want to hold out the best of thoughts that people are doing things for all the right reasons. Maybe at the beach house of the president, there's some sort of situation room where they've mapped it all out and are going to solve the border crisis. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm sure you're right. Look, everybody deserves a vacation. You take a vacation when you want. I would think somebody would point out the optics. You know, it's too easy a target, frankly, to criticize. I want to go back to the theme of the first block, which for me anyway was, what's going on? You know, Americans are puzzled when they look around and they see these things happening before them that that are seemingly inexplicable. The coin toss is a pretty great metaphor, right? Maybe we'll enforce the laws, maybe we won't.
Wow.
Right? I mean, like when you have, to me, you know, just speaking personally, the whole border conversation and the whole migration debacle and this humanitarian crisis, they're all separate conversations. Then they're all under this rubric, this larger question, which I think is, do you enforce, what happens to a country that doesn't enforce the laws they have on the books? What happens, right? It leads reasonable, normal people to start feeling really profoundly disconnected from their government. If you have a law and you willfully ignore it, the unintended consequences of doing that over time are exponential. And it's one more brick in the wall of this ambiguity and uncertainty that so many people are feeling. Why? And there's just no good answer.
Miranda.
Look, the fact is, we have to be honest, the border is wide open, and that is by design. Joe Biden came in on the very first day of his presidency, unwound all those Trump-era protections, and then since then, he started this fire. He's pretended that it isn't happening. He's ignored it. He's hoping the media ignores it. Unfortunately, with this disaster under the bridge in Del Rio, you've got 15,000 mostly Haitian immigrants who are living, as you said, in squalid conditions, not enough food, not enough water. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. So they had to come in with Plan B and pretend they were doing something. They lied to the American people and they said that they were going to ship all these people back, deport them back to Haiti. Most of them have been living in Chile or Brazil for the last 5 years, so that's cruel. But they're not shipping them back. They sent back yesterday 327 Haitians, adult single males. The family groups, the rest of them, they have been shipped out, 3,000 of them to the rest of America, and that's what will happen. Most of those people will stay here and disappear into the community.
So you know, I do want to ask this question, Emily, because there are real reasons, asylum, for people to be allowed to stay in this nation. And Haiti's president was killed, assassinated just a few weeks ago. And we knew this summer that that nation was devolving very quickly. Those are legitimately refugees. But because Biden has left the border open, right? Some of them might be able to apply, right? But because he's left the border open, as you heard Jay Johnson, former Secretary of Homeland under Obama, say, well, 200,000 are a lot. And look at how hot it is. This is usually not the month that they come in. Now you're having to deal with everything else on top of this. So if there are people who should be allowed to stay, and I'm not saying that all 15,000 of them under the bridge are, but they do have a right to apply at that point. We can't even take the applications.
Oh, of course not. And our system is already so overwhelmed to the point that the waiting lists for legitimate asylum claims are over a year. We are absolutely overburdened, and something needs to change. Clearly, however, at the direction of this administration, it doesn't seem like the border closing would be among the options that they are entertaining. I have to point out as well, just to provide a little bit more color of the landscape for viewers, number one, over half of those over 300 Haitians that were deported were under the age of 5. Secondly, that was, I believe, a few flights. I wouldn't even conjecture because I can't remember off the top of my head. But the Department of Homeland Security estimates that 5 to 8 flights per day will start occurring in combination with a bump of 400 border agents being put down to the border. Now this, remember, after President Biden himself said, give me a couple days, man, when people said abolish ICE, when people said abolish the Homeland Security and border protection. So this, all of a sudden now, we are bumping up resources to an area that this president was very committed to depleting resources from. And final quick point as well, that the governor, Greg Abbott, today wrote a letter pleading to President Biden to declare the state of Texas in a full state of emergency because of the burden on the local and state resources as well as federal.
Well, they could have done that 6 months ago.
This issue is federal.
I mean, this was a flip of the switch from those Trump policies, right?
Yeah.
And as Mike and Miranda have been pointing out, it makes you feel in America like nothing works.
Right.
So you flipped a switch, and they literally could have declared a state of emergency in many states along the border the minute the switch was flipped.
Exactly right. They flipped the switch and a flood of migrants came in. And meanwhile, we have an MIA problem, missing in action problem, or maybe I should say MII, missing an inaction problem. Because where are the Democrats? Instead of addressing this, they're pushing for amnesty and that $3.5 trillion bill. Thankfully, the Senate parliamentarian said, no, 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 you can't do that. And where are the journalists? Outside of Bill Malugin, who has done amazing work for Fox News, where are the journalists? They are MII.
Well, some of us are trying to ask the questions, but we're just deemed annoying. I'm used to it.
The United States, where the humanitarian situation at the U.S. Mexico border continues to worsen, while the decisions of U.S. President Joe Biden bring further suffering. Despite the calls of several Democrat lawmakers, Biden ordered the immediate deportation of Haitian nationals who've managed to cross the border. Over 300 Haitians have already been deported. More than 15,000 people, mostly Haitians, who took refuge in a makeshift camp in Del Rio, Texas, are requesting an opportunity to start a new life in the United States after months of crossing different Latin American countries. Having overcome numerous threats, the brutality of security forces along the way, and the exploitation of criminal groups, these people seeking to escape violence and poverty will be sent back to the starting point. Many have lost their lives along the way. Mass deportations are considered a violation of human rights, especially when the returnees are exposed to the risks that hasten their flight from their home country. For thousands of asylum seekers, to return is to die.